Yeah, so I missed out. I forgot to talk about some things in biology that I think are important that I just want to mention really quick. But it goes on and on. Look at the body, the human body, to study up the stuff. Every single aspect of biology, you see the form. But just some cool things that you might want to check out. One is Tim Bergen's 4 questions. You learn about this in every evolutionary biology, psychology class. You got ontogeny, phylogeny, mechanistic and adaptation. One interesting fact is that Freud says that ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny. Phylogeny is the history of evolution of sequential changes in a species over many generations, and ontogeny is developmental explanations for changes in individuals from DNA to their current form. So what he means by ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny is when a baby is born, when it starts off as an embryo, it first looks like a fish. So it goes through the evolutionary history of the species. So it first looks like a fish, then it looks like kind of amphibian, then it looks like a lizard, it looks like a mammal more, and then it starts to look more like a human, a fetus, human fetus. And then, and I did want to mention that too, I forgot to mention that if you look at animals, just animals, you have the first quadrant would be fish, second quadrant amphibian. Amphibians are more social. You see like the frogs hanging out together, they have the tadpoles, they have those millions of tadpoles. They're more social than reptiles, so the third quadrant is reptiles. Fish are a little more social, amphibians are a little more social, but reptiles, they start to become more individuals. Then you got the mammals, and we are mammals. And then you got, to transcending the next quadrant, you got the birds. Some people actually say that the birds shouldn't be right here because they say that they're reptiles. I've heard that. That could be wrong. But then you got birds. And then you could say that there's also insects, which are really social. So remember, we're in the second quadrant now. So birds, insects, really social. Birds are monogamous. They're kind of like mammals. A lot of birds are monogamous. They don't. But, it's questionable. Are mammals really monogamous? Or, are humans really monogamous? Not all mammals are. And then we got the spider, which would be the individual, more individual, third quadrant one. But these are the animals of fish, amphibian, reptile, mammal, and bird. So this is a quadrant model with that. Then you just want to run through, you got ethology, you got the types of behavior, and it takes the quadrant. There's egoistic, cooperative, altruistic, and revengeful based on these this dichotomy between effect on the donor and effect on the receiver. If it has an increase in fitness and decrease in fitness for the donor and a decrease in fitness for the receiver, it's egoistic. And then it goes on. Just looking at certain stuff, you got the 4 discourses by this guy, Jacques Lacan. I guess that's how you say his name. I don't really know. But you just go on and on. It goes with everything. Every subject. The school, you got the 4 types of schools. But a lot of it's taken from, there's the 4 causes by Aristotle. The material cause, the formal cause, the efficient cause, and the final cause. And it takes the same pattern. It's the form. But we don't want to bore ourselves going through the details of all these things, and there's a lot more. You got the Baconian method. He has the 4 idols. Yeah, but we don't want to get to study all this. Just know that all this stuff just follows a model. It follows the pattern. So going back to just talking about the NFs. NFs tend to they get involved with activities with the church, or with the synagogue or certain things. They're into stuff like this, maintaining order. They're into church stuff, all these types of things. You see them at the leading these groups, involved in such activities as this. They can be gullible, which make every once in a while, but not necessarily gullible, but they tend to be what Kiersey says, credulous. They believe things easily. They don't really question it so much, so they'll believe in, if you tell them that, or just examples, like I talked to them, but, and this isn't necessarily bad or anything, but, and they could be right, but they'll believe in things like, I can talk to somebody with my mind, and this is something that I can do, or I can meditate things with my mind, or, I can levitate after meditation. These types of things. They tend to be more inclined to believe in stuff like that. All right. Oh, one thing that I remember an idealist and NF said was, but they're very inspiring too. But it was funny because he said, if life doesn't work out on our planet, then hopefully it'll work out on another one somewhere else in space. This is something that you could definitely picture an NF saying. It's kind of inspirational, but at the same time, it's a stereotypical NF comment, or first quadrant oriented comment. All right, now let's talk about a little bit more. Well, like I said, also NFs there's more female NFs, so it makes sense. Some people say that the stereotype of women. I'm not saying all women are like this, but there is a higher percentage of women who are NFs, and these NF women, people have the stereotype of women in general, but maybe it's because there's a higher percentage of NFs, or first quadrant oriented women. And the stereotype is that they're easily, manipulated. They're more credulous. Okay. Now, I wanted to actually, let me think about what I want to discuss right now. Okay, I kind of want to discuss a little bit more of art, actually. So, one example of something I wanted to discuss was, what was it? The Wu-Tang Clan. I like the rap group, the Wu-Tang Clan, and when they would talk to each other, they would refer to themselves as gods. So it'd be like, "Hey, what's up, God? Hey," and they would call each other God. Now, like I said, art tends to be subversive, or a lot of art, good art tends to be subversive. It makes you think. And a part of this has to do with, I think it was I forget what the group was called, but it's some sort of Nation of Islam group. But it was a black supremacist. It was inspired from black supremacist group that says that black man is the God on earth. He's the God on the earth. So black men are gods. And, you can see this being adopted as a way to subvert white culture. White culture tends to treat black people in general poorly, even if they pretend like they're colorblind now. But really, actually, in fact, when people claim they're colorblind now, they're just actually maintaining the order, because then they could ignore injustices and ignore the fact that there still is discrepancies, there still is socioeconomic differences. So by saying, "Oh, I don't see color," you could just ignore. You say, "Oh, I don't believe in, I'm not racist." They say, "I love black people," but then they say that, but then they ignore what's actually going on. But so Wu-Tang Clan, they're saying they call each other God when they call each other gods. So a lot of people might be offended by this. Actually, the ideology that they get this from, I forget the name of it, but it's some sort of Nation of Islam thing, I think. I forget the name exactly, but it's called the 5 Percenters. and the 5%ers believe that there's 5% of the world is, and these are, you know, black men, they think, but 5%, there's a 5% that is free from the system. They recognize the true nature of reality, and they're free from the shackles of society and the conventional world. So it's interesting that the rational quadrant, that makes up 5% of the people, about the INTJ, ENTJ, ENTP, and INTP. The 5%ers say that there's 10% of the population that knows the truth, but because they kind of are more conservative, they want to maintain the order of the day. They want to maintain the order. They like it. They don't want to shake things up too much. The 10%ers the idealists actually make up 10% of the population. So, you know, it'd be interesting if this person who came up with this ideology system, which a lot of people follow, if he was inspired by this model. But you see these percentages in a lot of things. We'll get to that hopefully later. But the 10%ers, yeah, so as they said, the 10%, and it's kind of interesting, I'm not going to get into too much, but okay, so the 10%, and they say the rest of the world, the other 85%, I guess, yeah, the other 85% is the sheep who are being led, and who are not capable of questioning and seeing the truth. This is what but according to the 5%ers, they say that the rationals, or not the rationals, but they say the 5% hopefully can lead the world out of their brainwashing and lead the world to see the truth. Okay. Okay, but going back to Wu-Tang, they would say that they would call each other gods. Now, people might get offended by this. Remember, art is subversive. But you read even the Gospels, and you read John. And in this Gospel story, it's the same pattern. Jesus is saying, you know, that he is the shepherd and there's the sheep, and that if the sheep would just, you know, he says that the sheep know that he's a shepherd, and if they would just believe in him, then they would have eternal life. If the sheep would just believe in him, they would have eternal life. What is this referring back to again? The Garden of Eden. God told them, if you would just obey me, you, Adam and Eve, will have eternal life in this bliss of the garden. Okay? And then he says, so he's saying this, but then the Jews, they won't believe him. And then he tells the Jews, remember the Jews are portrayed as fourth quadrant, not second quadrant, the belief oriented. They're portrayed more as fourth quadrant, knowing. They don't just believe it. So then Jesus says, you guys are you're the same type of thing. He says that where he talks about that there's a thief, and the thief goes into the place where the sheep are, and he steals the sheep, and it steals them from this eternal life. Well, once again, what is this an allusion to? What is this alluding to? This is alluding to the snake, the serpent, that, depending on how you want to look at it, that took the Adam and Eve, that stole them out of the Garden of Eden, or another way of looking at it is freed them from the Garden of Eden. So remember, this is great literature. The way that this is being presented, it's alluding back to the garden, and once again, the Jews are not believing it. They're portrayed as fourth quadrant, and Jesus is portraying the rest of the people as second quadrant. But then the Jews start to say, "Hey, Jesus, you're calling yourself the Son of God. Isn't that bad?" And then Jesus tells them, does it not say in the book, and he's referring to Psalms, he says, does it not say that we are gods? So this is an interesting thing. Remember, I said Hinduism, there's some sects in Hinduism that say that man is God. Well, here Jesus is saying, does it not say that we are gods? It's interesting. He puts a question mark. There's a question mark. Does he not? I'm pretty sure, because he says, does he not say that we are gods? But the interesting thing is, yes, he says this. So, when Wu-Tang Clan is talking about this, when they call each other gods, it's not so it's not such a crazy thing that they're doing. Even Jesus asked this question. Now, what's another example? What else? I wanted to talk about another art thing. Oh, here's another thing I wanted to bring up. So what's the ultimate thing that people say is not art? People always say that the opposite of art is pornography, right? I think it's kind of funny. I kind of bought into that. I thought, okay, yeah, pornography is not art. Now this is something that kind of broke me out of that thinking. Was I was watching a debate between Ron Jeremy and some Christian guy. And the Christian guy was saying, pornography is a horrible thing and we need to get pornography out of the world, and we need to stop pornography, and it's just a horrible, it's destroying families, it's destroying the kids, it's destroying everything. Remember, pornography is kind of more of a destructive force, perhaps third quadrant, perhaps getting into third, the right side. When I say second quadrant oriented, I'm talking about the left side of the quadrant. When I talk about fourth quadrant oriented, I'm talking about the right side of the quadrant. So he's saying pornography is a horrible thing, destroying the community. And then Ron Jeremy is trying to argue against him, but Ron Jeremy's making a dumb argument. He's saying, actually, I think that pornography is helping the community. It helps the community. He's saying, it can help bring wives and husbands together. They can, if their marriage is getting kind of dull, then they can watch pornography together. He's saying that it can facilitate marriages, facilitate happiness within marriages. So I guess that's an interesting response that he's making. But if I was Ron Jeremy in this situation, this is the response I would have. I would say, because the Christian was saying, according to the our Bible, according to the Gospels, marriage is a sacred institution, and pornography destroys marriages, and we are against pornography because it's destroying marriage. Well, what I would say to Ron Jeremy, you have to start reading the Gospels. You have to know what your opponent is talking about. And what I would do is you have to read the Gospels, and then you look and you say, actually, wait, Christianity says Jesus says nothing about marriage being a sacred institution. Jesus says that he came not to bring peace, but he came to bring a sword, and he would divide mother from son, and I forget exactly how he said it, but father and daughter. He says he basically says like he came to divide the family. He says in heaven people would not give in to marriage, but when he's referring to heaven, you can argue about it, but I have a lot of evidence to indicate that he's not referring to a heaven that people go to after death. He's talking about the kingdom of heaven. I could hopefully get into that more later, but that's established on earth, hopefully. That people wouldn't give in to marriages, period. When Jesus' family comes to try to see Jesus in one of the stories, one of his disciples comes and says, "Hey, Jesus, your family's here. They want to see you." And Jesus says, "Who's my family?" He says, this person here, he's my brother. And this person here, he's pointing to people who are not members of his family. He's saying that his actual, what people would say his biological family, actually, he's not saying, he's saying that they're not his family. He's not accepting them as being special part of his family. He says, "Who is my family?" So the viewpoint that the Christian's taking about, marriage is sacred and this stuff, it can be, based on the Gospels. It seems, the way that Jesus talks about it seems to indicate that that's not so. And originally when Christianity first developed, the Romans thought it was a really strange religion. Why did the Romans not like it so much? Because the Romans were looking at the first Christians and they were saying, wow, these people are anti-family. According to the person that they, worship as God, the family is not that important. And so it's interesting that that's the way it was. But now you kind of see the opposite. Now Christians take the more Roman view, the pagan view, that family is so important. All right. That's all I want to say for right now. And then, so then there's, one more thing I want to say though. So then this one guy is saying, one of the Christian guys, there was two Christian guys saying it, and there was another Christian person. And the other Christian guy was saying, it destroyed my marriage. Pornography, it destroyed my marriage. It was horrible. He was saying, if it wasn't for pornography, he was basically saying, if it wasn't for pornography, I would have stayed happily married and everything would have been great. People always like to point their finger at something and blame something, like pornography, and say, if only I didn't have pornography. But I'm pretty sure probably there was other things involved. And it's always good to have a scapegoat. It's always easy to have a scapegoat, point at something and say, this is the reason for my problems, this pornography. And it makes you feel better about yourself. It reduces cognitive stress. So I think that's interesting. And then another thing that I want to say is, so then a woman comes up and she's saying, pornography, it's so horrible. And she's saying, the reason why it's so bad is because it causes people to question she's saying, it makes you wonder what is real. She's saying that, after these people watch pornography enough, they don't know what real sex is like. They don't know what a real relationship is like. They look at the pornography and they see these certain acts, and then when they get into the bedroom, they don't know what's normal, what's not normal. They don't know what to expect, and things are not, it's horrible. She's saying people are starting to question, what is normal behavior, what is real, what's not real. What did I say earlier? First off, this is what art's supposed to do. It's supposed to make you think, make you question things. So this is making me think, wow, actually pornography is art. Second off, it's important to ask what is real. Especially now that the quadrant model is revealed. We see that this is actually a very important question. Is anything real now? This is a question that has to be asked. And now, this is a good segue to, so we talk about science, first quadrant, religion, second quadrant, art, third quadrant, philosophy is a fourth quadrant field of inquiry. Art has moved us elegantly to philosophy. Hopefully we continue that in a minute.